Welcome to the S.O.A.P Bible Study Series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. We're working our way through the book of 2 Kings right now, and we're
in the middle of it.
Yeah, we're in the middle of it, and it's just sort of doing its thing, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? So we did. There was a lot of talk about prophets, right? And now, since we are in Kings, we're now following
about kings.
Yeah, we're following the kings. And that's the part where we feel like we're sludging through them, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah, but it makes sense. We're in 2 Kings. We should be talking about kings.
Let me jump in, because there are 20 in the north, 20 in the south, right?
Yep.
And so, like we've talked about, there's this overlap, and there's this timeline and who's who, and all this stuff. But yeah, we've got to get through 40 kings here.
Right. But that timeline is pretty cool. And what I wanted to point out and make sure everybody knew, you can actually follow the timeline along and rank when somebody started, when somebody ended, and you have kings on both sides, right? That are just kind of overlap each other. And I really found it confusing the first time I read it, because it said something like, in the 3rd year of King so-and-so's reign of Judah. And then they talk about another king who's from Israel.
Yeah.
And it's like, what? But they're doing this timeline thing. And if you know when this other king started, now you know where this second king started.
Yeah.
So actually, if you have any date along the whole timeline, you can figure everything out.
Yeah, pretty close. There's a little bit of...
but it's also... we're 3,000 years old.
Yeah, but there is this some systems. It's like, okay, do we count their first year as 0? Do we count their first year as 1? Do they have to get a whole year before it's 1?
Well, and there's some guys that actually coded it. So where do you?
So for the last 3 years of this guy, was the first
Dad kind of was
years
retired, but he's still king.
Yeah. So it's not quite as exact, which is why if you've got different study Bibles, you may see some dates are a little bit different. But you're right. I mean, overall, if you wanted to map this out on a timeline, you'd get really close.
Yeah.
Really close.
All right, so let's go through some kings. And next week we'll still go through some kings, but there's also some bigger stuff that happens next week.
Yeah.
So
it slows down next week, and we'll tell you why that is. But it's slow. This really big repetitive seems to almost it slowed way down.
Right. Okay, so we got a new king. This king is the king of Judah, and his name sure looks like amazing. Right? So is it Amaziah? All right, so Amaziah became king over Judah. As always, it gives you the terms, right? He started at age 25. He reigned for 39 years in Jerusalem, and he did what the Lord approved. Well, there's always a but let's be happy, because this is one of what we would call the good kings, and we only see this of the kings in Jerusalem or Judah, versus the kings in Israel.
Which let's not forget, that's David's line in Judah. So all 20 in the north were going to be wicked, evil to some degree or another.
Right.
Still, fewer than half. Right, or less than half. Only 8 out of 20 in the south in Judah were actually good to any level at all.
Right. So the high places, he still let the pagan sacrifices go. When he secured his kingdom, and again, I still think that's the first major step that we see the kings do. Right, you come in, you have to secure the kingdom. He actually executed the servants that killed his father. So from last week, his father was bad enough that the servants took him out.
Yeah.
So this king isn't necessarily disagreeing that should have happened, but he also had to take care of some business too.
Yeah.
But he also stopped with the servants and not the whole families.
Which is really good, because a lot of times you would see, we're just going to wipe out everybody.
Yep. Nobody's going to be able to take revenge.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was kind of cool. And then he also had some military wins, which is kind of cool. But then he sends a message to the king of Israel requesting to meet him face to face.
Yeah, so it says, "Come, let's meet face to face." which sounds like an innocuous request.
Yeah,
Right?
right.
It's like, let's schedule a Teams meeting, a Zoom meeting or whatever, right? Based on the response, I don't think that's exactly what he was saying.
Basically, let's meet up for a war.
Yeah, right.
I'm hot. I got a couple wins under my belt. I want to challenge you.
Let's dance, baby.
Yeah.
Let's do this.
And the response back was, "You got to win," and how it went to your head. And it was actually kind of counseling him too, but I think there's a little goading behind there. You know, don't let this go to your head.
Yeah, don't let this go to your head. But if you want to dance, I'm in.
Yep. So Amaziah wouldn't back down. So the other team attacked and defeated Judah.
Yeah.
And then they marched all the way to Jerusalem, and they actually broke down about 600 feet of the wall, going around there, and took all the gold and silver from the temple and the royal palaces, and took hostages too, which is definitely important, right? Because you use those hostages to stop retaliation.
Right.
Yeah. So a couple other kings came and went, and the king of Judah is the amazing guy still, who's not so amazing. And in Israel, we have a Jeroboam who reigns now for 41 years. So we have quite a big...
Yeah. So if you're reading along in a Bible that has little headings, you're going to notice that he's called Jeroboam the second. That's because if we go all the way back to 1 Kings, the first king of Israel, when Solomon died and the nation was split into two kingdoms, the first king of Israel was named Jeroboam. So now we have another Jeroboam. But I love this little section right here in chapter 14 because we get a tiny little peek. We actually this is the first of two connections that I want to make for you of like really common stories or accounts in the Old Testament. Most people don't realize that Jonah actually shows up outside of the book of Jonah. And here he is. He's called a servant of God. He was given a prophecy earlier. He made the prophecy, the whole thing. We actually see him away from the whole fish and Nineveh type thing that we see in the book of Jonah. And then also you see him as a prophet here and a good guy, right? And that it actually helps us place the book of Jonah too, like we're talking about on that timeline, right? Because here he is during Jeroboam II's reign,
right? So new king did evil in the sight of the Lord, but God said, "Look, I can't blot out Israel from our memory," so He actually delivers them. And there was some good that came out of it. He was actually able to restore the borders of Israel, or some of the borders of Israel.
Yeah, a little bit. Yep.
All right. So Azariah becomes king over Judah. He's also known. He's got a second name. Mm-hmm. Is any special reason why?
Well,
to make it harder for me to pronounce?
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Uzziah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Uzziah, which I'll make another connection here in a little bit, but
okay, keep talking.
Go ahead.
All right.
Go ahead.
So he was 16, reigned for 52 years, which really means he's going to be on this side, reigning for 52 years. There's going to be a bunch of guys on the other side. Yep. Yeah, and it really doesn't matter if it's for Judah or Israel. It happens all the time, right? There's some short and long ones. So he did what the Lord approved, but he didn't remove the pagan idols from the high places. And God gave him a skin disease until the day he died. So he was from Judah, so they still would have been following the Mosaic law. Mm-hmm. Having a skin disease is going to be a big problem.
Depending on which skin disease. Depending on which one he had, it could have made him ritually unclean.
Right.
Like for his entire life.
Well, that's the way I took it.
Right. Or it could have just been an annoyance and just...
Well, I think we get a little hint because it says his son was in charge of the palace and ruled over the people and became king once his father passed away.
Yeah.
I take that to be that the son was kind of the face of the office.
Could be. While
the king was ruling in the background.
Yeah. Yeah, that could be, which if he were unclean, he would pretty much have to do that, right?
All right, so Zechariah became king over Israel for 6 months. It's not going to end well. He was evil. He was assassinated by Shalom, who took his place. And the big thing here is this event fulfilled God's prophecy. God gave Jehu 4 generations. He said 4 generations of your descendants will reign. Then I'm cutting
And
you
that's
off.
it. Yeah. And shouldn't have to make the point, but I'm going to anyway. This is not the same Zechariah as the prophet that we read about later in the Old Testament. Of course, lots of names are repeated.
Shalom, doesn't matter, don't get attached to him. He reigned for 1 month. He was killed by Menahem, who became king and was absolutely ruthless. He struck down a city because they wouldn't surrender. And then we find that the king of Assyria invaded Israel, right? And that king, and then this king paid him 1,000 talents of silver to give his support. So it's always a question of how much money a talent is. We've been saying it's about a year's wages of a normal person.
Yep.
So it's significant.
Big time.
Yeah, 1,000 talents. And, it's like, okay, where'd this guy get the money? Because, nobody has money. And they keep warring everyone. But he got it by taxing the wealthy men. And he, in Israel, and he, 50 shekels for everybody. So he basically got the money from the people, which is exactly where the money always comes from.
Yeah,
anyways.
if he's taxing people. I mean, that's the only place the government gets money is taxing people, right?
Yeah, so his son replaced him and reigned for 2 years, and then his son became king, reigned for 20. This is back and forth.
Right.
And I'm sorry, we're laughing here, but I'm not minimizing it at all.
No, of course.
It's just tough to kind of read through these and pay attention.
Yeah, we're not saying that we should just gloss over it. It's worth
and
reading.
it's important
worth
because we're seeing this downward trend. And we're seeing all the chances that God has given them, and we're going to find out that at some point God has had enough, and He's going to act on His own.
Yeah, we're not too far from that.
Yeah. So during this reign, Assyria invaded again and captured most of the northern kingdom.
Yes. Now this is
big.
This is huge. It's not quite the complete fall of the northern kingdom, but this is what we were talking about. Things are going to slow down on the king front next week because this is almost the end of the northern kingdom. Next week we will actually come to the end, and then for the rest of the book it's all Judah all the time because Israel as a northern kingdom no longer exists. Yeah, that'll be next week, but this is the beginning of it.
Right. So in Judah, Jotham became king at age 25 and reigned for 16 years. So another decent reign for Judah. He, again, did what the Lord approved, but didn't remove the pagans from the high places.
Yep.
All right. So Jotham's son, Ahaz, whatever. He became king in Judah at 26.
20 years old.
Yep. He was an evil king, didn't follow God, and passed his son through fire, which is a pagan practice.
Right.
Terrible practice.
Now we come to this new connection, okay? Because we've got 2 names here that we might recognize, Uzziah and Ahaz, right?
Yep.
So, if these names sound familiar, like I can't quite place them, let me give you a quick refresher. In Isaiah chapter 6, verse 1, we read, "In the year that King Uzziah died," Isaiah says, "I saw the Lord high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple." And that was his vision where he saw God in the heavenly temple and got his commission, right? "Here am I, send me." That's Uzziah, Ahaz's grandfather. In the very next chapter, in Isaiah chapter 7, he is actually standing in front of this Ahaz, same guy, and says, "Listen, buddy, you're taking the wrong path here, right?
Yep.
You need to know that you need to ask God for a sign about what you should do." And Ahaz got all spiritual. "Oh, I would never ask God for a sign." And we get the famous quote, "Then the Lord himself shall give you a sign. A virgin will conceive and bear a child, and we'll call his name Emmanuel." Sound familiar? These are the same 2 kings. This is Uzziah and Ahaz that we find in Isaiah chapter 6 and 7. So again, we can place the prophet right
this
here.
Is why it's important.
Yes.
To go through these.
This is why it's important, because we can start to see these connections, and the Bible really does fit together.
Yeah. So what are we calling him? Ahaz?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
He's not here to defend himself.
Yeah,
anyway,
right. So Israel and Syria team up against Judah, right? And
Now, you said it right, no problem, but this is where people start to get confused because there is Syria and Assyria, and they're two different groups. Two different groups.
yes,
Okay, so
yeah,
I mean,
completely,
you're right.
completely, separate.
Absolutely.
Right.
So you're right. Teaming up with Syria, not Assyria at this point.
And so we really have three now. And at any point, two have teamed up on the other ones. So, so this is not a surprise here.
Yep.
So Ahaz chooses to go to Assyria for help.
Yeah.
Instead of going to God.
Yes.
And Assyria conquered Damascus, Syria capital, killed their king, kind of took care of business. But I think it also is foreshadowing where Assyria is going to be going,
Yeah.
and
what's going on down
sticking
there.
their nose into some business here.
Right. So just let me throw out another name just to make sure, just to help clarify this a little bit.
Yes, yeah, very close.
No. So Assyria, the capital would be Nineveh.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, right. I didn't
right.
say it wrong. Yeah.
Right. No, you
Nineveh-
had it.
Nineveh
But we hadn't said that one yet. And that's the same Nineveh that Jonah went to.
Yeah.
Ding, ding, ding. We just saw him, right? So that's Assyria and Nineveh. Syria, the capital is Damascus, right?
Right, more regional.
Yeah. Now, if we were looking at a modern map, all of that is encapsulated in modern Syria. Okay. But those back then were actually two
Separate.
different, let's say, nations or regions or something. Yeah. Yeah. So don't get confused. You're like, I thought this was all the same thing. No, it really does make a difference when you're reading.
So Ahaz is from Judah.
Yeah.
Right. But we know he's bad.
Yep.
He doesn't go to God to say, God help us. Instead, he goes to the big power, Assyria.
Yep.
And then he literally goes to Assyria.
Yeah.
And while he's in Assyria, he sees their altar room and goes, wow, that's awesome.
I want one of those.
So he makes a copy of it, just sketches it out and sends the plans back to Jerusalem, and the priests actually built an altar using those plans. And when he gets back,
You mean instead of the altar that was already there for God?
right. So now we have a second altar, and in my mind, they are exactly right next to each other. I have no idea. Yeah. But the king actually offers burnt sacrifices on his new altar versus the one that the priests use. Yeah. So there is, when we say he's evil, and he's entirely discounted God.
Yeah. And this is the guy that Isaiah had several run-ins with during
Which,
this
how
time.
much fun is that going to be?
Right.
When he doesn't even believe in your God, and
Yeah.
all you're going to do is bring him bad news.
Not fun. I was going to say fun fact, not fun fact, but according to, let's say, tradition and history, Isaiah was killed as a martyr by being placed in a hollowed-out log and being sawn in half. That's how they killed him. This is the type of, we have already seen he's burning his children to a pagan god. He's killing prophets. He's offering. That's who this guy is. This is a descendant of David.
Right.
This is still David's line. This is terrible, terrible.
Right. So that ends our reading. We're obviously ending on a down note.
Yeah.
But still, I really like those connections you made, because it certainly, brings the whole Bible together.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't see that, right? Because we're
Just
focusing
reading
on
this.
a
It doesn't
book.
say Isaiah anywhere in here yet.
Yeah.
Right? So
Right.
they're seeing these things together. Yeah.
Right.
So, hopefully I'm not sure if enjoyed is the right word, but hopefully you found this helpful, useful in your reading, seeing some of these connections together. Maybe you already knew these things, and it's a great refresher, reminder. But let's just stay in here. Next week we'll pick up, and we already spoiled it a little bit. Israel comes to an end as a kingdom, not as a nation, but as the northern kingdom next week. And we'll pick up here in chapter 17 next week. But let's not forget, we already saw in here, God is faithful. He can't let them be destroyed completely because he is a covenant-keeping, promise-keeping God. And that's something that we can take to the bank every day of the week, right? Every day, even us. So share this with your friends and family. Subscribe if you haven't yet, and encourage them to do the same thing. And we'll pick up here next week.
Bye, everyone.